what would be your first seed that you would not want to start inside?
I mentioned this recently, and I'm going to fall back on it. Rosemary, and it is not something that is difficult to transplant. It's not something that grows fast. In fact, the reason why I wouldn't, and I think I'm cheating on the honorable mentions, the reason why I wouldn't start it inside or start it at all is because of how slowly it grows, how much time it takes to get to a sizable state. And to your point of where I am, a very young plant, I feel like I'd have difficulties overwintering, so I wanna buy a plant that's been growing for quite a while. Like, somebody probably started the rosemary plant that I'll buy this late this spring. They probably started it last summer and have had it growing indoors, you know? And I just it's also an herb that I don't use a ton of.
Right.
So that's I don't wanna babysit it.
Yeah.
So
No, it's funny. It's amazing. You actually brought up, and this is exactly the point. So for me, rosemary is perennial. It grows. I've had the same plant in my yard for 8 years. Um, it comes back every year. But I went down this rabbit hole the other day. I just got a bunch of seeds to start some flowers. And I'm like, well,
mhm.
look, I know that flowers need to be cold stratified a lot of times. So I've been kind of
Not
going,
all,
not all,
but
but there's
some.
a lot of
Mhm.
them. And I did not realize rosemary needs cold stratification right off the
Oh,
bat.
I didn't know
Yeah,
it
that's
either.
a big
I
part
just
of
shut
it.
it down, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't realize it either because it's not really a tropical plant, but it's kind of close, but totally different. So for me, one, it has to be cold stratified, kind of a pain in the butt. But two, I don't need a lot of them. Just like you, even if I couldn't and I could just grow a plant for one season, one plant that got to be 8 inches tall, it'd probably be all the rosemary I would need. So there's a
Mhm.
little bit of subjectiveness into this too, where somebody may love rosemary and eat it every meal, which I think is highly unlikely, but it's a possibility. So there is that aspect of it.
All kinds of decorative ways to use it. I feel like I probably would use it more, and it also there's a fragrance that it adds to the garden as
Yeah.
well, and I am trying to lean more into not only the sight, but the smell, different sensories. If I had more of it, I'm sure I'd find a way over time to use more of it. I don't I don't think I had it in my garden at all last year,
Yeah.
and I don't feel like I missed it.
Speaking of fragrance, I'm on the hunt for some sweet pea seeds, which you can't find anywhere. So I've got
Mhm.
like a week to get them in the ground. So I've been looking local and it's not working out well. So, all right. So my first one, um, there's a couple, but I got a comment about two different seeds on my YouTube channel recently. And one of them was carrots. Somebody wanted to transplant carrots. Now I know Batavia's done it successfully, and I understand that. But overall, it doesn't really transplant well at all. It's one of those, and root crops in general can be very difficult, but carrots specifically are difficult. So you want to be very careful with those. And they just, because if you mess up that root, you're going to get a deformed carrot. Not to mention, if you think about the spacing of a carrot can be 16 per square foot or more. So think about all those seed cells you'd have to start in order to get your transplant for it and then plant them out early enough. I don't think that it's worth it. And across the board, I think most people say absolutely not. The one problem is with them is they're notoriously difficult to germinate. So you got to have a little bit of, there's got to be a happy medium in there. And I don't know what that happy medium is other than just learn how to germinate them in the ground, plain and
Yeah, so,
simple.
it's such a good one, but there are a couple of different perspectives on that one for me. So I agree, it's not worth starting.
There it is.
But let me share some of the thoughts that may lead you to saying, but maybe. So the one time that I thought you were referring to was when I started them indoors in a container that I ultimately moved outside when time came, right? So that's not transplanting, that's just moving the whole growing medium. The other time though, and I did this as recent as last year, so carrots are notoriously hard to get to germinate, really perfect conditions almost is what they're looking for. And so a lot of people, probably one of the most overseeded crop ever is carrots. You're
Yeah.
putting down many more seeds than you ever expect to get plants out of. So I've done, and I generally, these are kind of bad gardener habits. I generally don't like to thin. I find that it's tedious. And then when I do it, I feel like it's wasteful because I'm looking at a future vegetable,
Yeah.
right? I'm looking at a future plant. So I've taken carrot thinnings, if you will, and then transplanted those into other space. I don't know if I'll stop doing that, but going back to my, it's not worth it. It's a real time suck.
Yeah.
Like, but I was driven to it because I have the small tender root and I have the tops of this carrot. If I start with another round of seeds, I'm kind of starting that whole, I hope that they make it. I hope that they germinate game again. So why not take the thing that I already have? But it's like a slow garden day when I do that. So yeah, carrots absolutely for the reasons you described. I would recommend planting them, sowing them where they're going to grow. Um, Unless you're doing again the thing that I did where you start them inside and they're going to stay and grow in that same container because that's the only thing you'd be moving outside, and you move that container outside. So yeah, and I've not done that because I've been fighting over the last. I've not done that besides that one time because over the last few years I've been fighting aphids indoors and separately fungus gnats.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm trying to limit the things that would increase the likelihood of that.
I will
If you're
say,
growing, just one more note, if you're growing something like carrots in a container that you're moving outside, you kind of want that container to be rich in soil, right?
yeah.
And so that is a prime opportunity. And I didn't realize this when I did it many years ago. Prime opportunity to invite creatures
Yeah.
into wherever your space is,
Well,
which I did.
what I'll say too about carrots is it's a good example of why a gardener can't just start any seed inside and shouldn't, but it's the desire to do so because we all want to get the jump up on it. And so it's one of the few, and I'm pretty comfortable saying there's a few that just absolutely should not be started inside. And then some of these are obviously you have the option to, you just need to pick. But carrots are one of them that just it's for me it's an absolute no go.
Yeah, I think that if we're looking at the scale of, absolutely not versus these are the reasons why we really wouldn't recommend it. Rosemary, these are the reasons why I wouldn't recommend it for my space and maybe yours. Carrots are an absolutely not on my list too.